Let go! You're being annoying.
I just want to talk.
Seoul. Winter. The kind of cold that makes the whole city look like it was built inside a snow globe. Perfect from the outside, suffocating if you actually live inside it. The Galleria Luxury Mall in Apgujeongdong was packed that afternoon. Shoppers moved between gleaming floors, between the smell of warm croissants and expensive perfume, between mannequins wearing clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Music played softly from hidden speakers. The ceiling was made of glass. Light fell through it like something holy. Makena was not thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the fact that she had exactly 47 minutes before her meeting with the creative director of a Seoul-based fashion house that had agreed to review her portfolio. 47 minutes. She had her designs in a leather folder. She had practiced what she would say. She had told herself 3 times that morning that she was ready, that this was her moment, that she had worked too hard and traveled too far to let anything shake her. She was wrong about the last part. She saw him near the escalator. Darius. He was standing with his hands in his pockets, watching her the way people watch something they used to own. Calm. Possessive. Like he had all the time in the world. Her stomach dropped. He was the last person on earth she expected to see in Seoul. She had left Nairobi. She had left everything about that chapter behind. The fights, the apologies, the silences that lasted days, the way he used to look at her like she was something he had purchased and was growing tired of. She had left all of it. And yet here he was, standing in the middle of a luxury mall in South Korea, looking at her like she had run away from him and he had simply followed. Because that was exactly what had happened. Makena turned. She tried to walk in the other direction. She heard his footsteps before she felt his hand. He grabbed her wrist. Not gently. You think you can just leave me and start acting international? His voice was low. The kind of low that was meant to sound controlled, but was actually the thing just before an explosion. She had heard that voice 100 times. She knew what it meant. She pulled her arm back. Let me go. People were glancing over. Not stopping. Not intervening. Just looking the way people look at a car accident. Long enough to confirm it is real, then moving on because it is not their business. Darius stepped closer. His smile was the worst kind of smile, the kind that had absolutely nothing warm inside it. Tell them, he said, loud enough for the people nearest to them to hear. Tell them how you used me. Tell them how you begged me for money when your little fashion dream was falling apart. Darius, tell them. She yanked her arm. I said let me go. He let go, but only so he could shove her. It was fast. It was hard. She did not see it coming. Her heel caught the edge of the polished floor wrong and snapped. The sound was sharp and small, like a twig, and then she was falling and there was nothing to grab, and she crashed sideways into a display table near the center of the mall floor. Mannequins fell. Glass shattered. Her leather folder burst open and her designs, months of work, hand-drawn and color-coded and organized with obsessive care, scattered across the floor. Her skirt rode up. Her elbow hit the tile, and the pain shot up to her shoulder instantly. And the phones came out. She heard them before she saw them. That soft clicking sound. That small collective movement of people raising their arms. Recording. Because in this world, suffering was content, and content was currency, and no one hesitated anymore. Makena lay on the floor of the Galleria Mall in Seoul, surrounded by broken glass and her scattered work, her ankle throbbing, her elbow burning, her pride in pieces, while strangers filmed her. Darius stood over her. He looked down at her and he said, loudly, clearly, for every recording phone to catch. Pick yourself up. This is what you are without me. If you love Sarang Noir stories, where Africa and Korea collide in the most beautiful way, then subscribe and become part of this growing family. Like, comment your country and tell me where you are watching from. Let's see how far this love reaches. Nobody moved. That was the part that stayed with her later. Not the fall. Not the phones. Not even his voice. It was the fact that an entire mall full of people stood there and nobody moved. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody said a word. They just watched and recorded and waited to see what would happen next, like she was a scene in a movie and her pain was entertainment. And then there was a voice. It came from somewhere behind Darius. Calm. Flat. The kind of voice that does not need volume to carry weight. You should help her. Darius turned around. The man standing there was tall. He was wearing a long black coat, the kind that is cut perfectly, the kind that costs more than it looks like it costs. He had his hands in his pockets. He was not rushing. He was not angry. His face was completely still, and his eyes were on Darius the way a person looks at something they are deciding what to do with. Park Seo-joon. That was his name. But he was not an actor. He was not famous. He was not the kind of man whose face appeared on billboards or fan sites. He was an architect. He designed buildings for people with the kind of money that does not need to be discussed out loud, for clients whose names never appeared in newspapers, for a network that operated in the spaces between legitimate business and something darker and older and far more dangerous. He had been walking through the mall to meet a client on the upper floor. He had heard the crash. He had stopped. Now he was looking at Darius. Darius laughed. "Who are you?" Park Seo-joon did not answer the question. Apologized to her. It was not a request. It was not a suggestion. It was the kind of sentence that sounds simple but contains an entire architecture of consequence inside it. Darius was not smart enough to hear that. He pushed him. It was the same move he had used on Makena, quick, dismissive, the gesture of a man who had never been pushed back against in his life, and therefore had no idea how to calculate risk. It was the wrong move. Within 3 seconds, not 5, not 10, 3, 2 men appeared. They had not been visible before. They had been standing at the edges of the mall floor, dressed in plain dark clothing, unremarkable, invisible the way trained people learn to be invisible. They moved without rushing. They positioned themselves on either side of Darius and held him. Not violently, not dramatically, just completely. And Darius went still because something in the way they touched him communicated something that words could not. Stop, or this becomes something else. Park Seo-joon did not look at his men. He did not look at the phones. He did not look at the crowd. He crouched down. He shrugged off his coat in one motion and laid it over Makena's legs, covering her, blocking every filming angle that had been capturing her from below. He did it without asking. He did it quickly and quietly, the way someone does something that is simply the right thing and does not need to be announced. Then he looked at her. Up close, his eyes were dark and very calm. Not cold calm. There was a difference that she would spend a long time thinking about later. "Can you stand?" His Korean was precise and unhurried. He switched to English without being asked, reading something in her face. Makena looked at him. Her elbow was bleeding. Her designs were all over the floor. There were still phones recording. Her pride was in 8 separate pieces. She looked at this man crouched next to her, this stranger who had covered her legs and asked her quietly if she could stand, while his people held the man who had knocked her down, and she did not know what to say. So she said the only honest thing. "My ankle hurts." He nodded. He did not offer his hand immediately. He did not try to lift her. He looked at her ankle briefly, then back at her face. "There is a medical room on the 3rd floor. Can you walk if I support you?" "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "So why would I go anywhere with you?" He looked at her steadily. "You can also stay here while they film you. That is your choice." She looked at the phones. She looked at her scattered designs on the floor. She looked at Darius, who was still being held without being harmed, his face cycling through anger and something that was starting to look like fear. She looked back at Park Seo-joon. "My designs," she said. "I need my designs." He stood up. He gathered them himself, every page, every sketch, picked them up carefully from the floor, organized them roughly, and slid them back into her folder. He did not look at them with curiosity. He did not comment on them. He just picked them up because she had asked. Then he came back and offered her his arm. Not his hand, his arm, so she could choose how much support to take. She took it. They walked toward the elevator together. His men released Darius without a word and followed at a distance. The crowd parted without being asked. The phones slowly lowered. Makena did not look back. But Darius watched her go, and the look on his face was not the look of a man who was finished. It was the look of a man who had just decided something. The medical room on the 3rd floor was small and clean and quiet in the way expensive places are quiet. The noise from outside simply did not exist in here. A mall staff member, who had clearly been called ahead of time, was already waiting with a first aid kit. She wrapped Makena's ankle efficiently and cleaned the cut on her elbow without asking unnecessary questions. Park Seo-joon stood near the door, coat gone now, his sleeves rolled slightly at the wrist. He was watching the staff member work. Then his eyes moved to Makena. She caught him. "You're staring." "I'm assessing damage." "To my ankle?" His eyes moved back to her face with something that was almost a smile. "To your pride." She scoffed. "You think you understand me already?" He stepped closer. Not much, just enough to change the distance between them. Not yet. Then stop acting like you do. I prefer learning by observation. She looked at him for a moment. And what have you observed? That you're angry. Obviously. That you're not weak. She held his gaze. And he looked at her for one long second. That you're trying very hard not to like me. The words landed precisely. She felt them the way you feel something true. That small internal resistance that confirms the thing is accurate. She folded her arms. You're very confident for someone who just met me. I didn't just meet you. Her brows came up. I've seen your work before. The room went quiet in a different way. Not uncomfortable. Charged. Where? A showcase in Nairobi. 2 years ago. You were presenting a collection. He paused. The construction was unusual. Asymmetric structure with traditional textile integrated into Western silhouettes. I was there for a client's event. Your booth was the one everyone kept returning to. Makena stared at him. She remembered that showcase. She had worked on that collection for 8 months. It had not made her famous. It had not launched her career the way she had hoped. But it had been the work she was most proud of, the work that felt most like her. And this man had seen it, and remembered it. 2 years later. She did not say any of that out loud. She looked away instead and said flatly, "Thank you for your help today." "You're welcome. I don't need anything else." "I know. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. I'll have a car ready." She looked back at him. "I didn't ask for a car. Your heel is broken and your ankle is sprained." He said it simply, not unkindly. "You can call your own car. I'm offering mine." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back without urgency, without pressure, like he genuinely did not care either way and was simply presenting an option. She hated how reasonable it was. Fine. The car was black and clean and silent. His driver did not speak. Park Seo-jun sat on the opposite side, not next to her, across from her, and looked out the window for most of the ride. She kept her folder in her lap and her eyes forward. "The man who shoved you," he said, without turning from the window. "My ex. He followed you from Nairobi." It was not a question. She looked at him sharply. "How do you know that?" He turned from the window then. "I know things. That's not an answer. It is the one I'm giving right now." She studied his face. It was an angular face, composed, private, the kind of face that gave very little away. But there was something in his eyes that was not completely closed. A small opening. A thin line of light under a door. "You should be careful," he said. "Men like that don't accept the word over. I know what kind of man he is. Then you know he'll be back." She looked away. "I can handle myself. I'm aware." He paused. "That doesn't mean you should have to do it alone." The car stopped in front of her building. She reached for the door handle. "Makena." She stopped. He had not used her name before. She had not told him her name. She turned slowly. "Your meeting," he said. "The creative director at Hanbok Nouvelle. He's difficult with first-time international creatives. He tests patience." A pause. "Don't let him." She stared at him. "How do you know where my meeting is?" He said nothing. She shook her head slowly. "You're strange." "Probably." She got out of the car. She walked to the entrance of her building, borrowed heels that were a half-size too small, ankle-wrapped, chin up. She stopped at the glass door and turned back. He was still watching from the car window. She held his gaze for 1 second. Then she walked inside. The meeting went well. Better than well. The creative director, who was indeed difficult, who did test her patience 3 separate times, left the table looking interested in a way he clearly tried to hide. She came home that evening with a tentative follow-up appointment and sore feet and a strange, persistent thought that she could not entirely shake. She thought about dark eyes and a black coat and a man who had picked up her work off the floor without being asked. She told herself it was just gratitude. She went to sleep. 2 days passed. On the 3rd day, there was a box at her building's front desk. No note. Inside, a pair of custom-made shoes in her exact size. Beautifully made. The kind of shoe that is clearly designed for someone, not purchased off a shelf, but built for a specific person's foot. She stood at the front desk staring at them for a long time. She did not have his number. She had no way to contact him. She did not even know his full name. She asked the building desk attendant who had delivered them. The attendant said a driver had dropped them off. No name. No return address. She carried the shoes upstairs. She put them on. They fit perfectly. She sat on the edge of her bed in a hotel room in Seoul wearing perfect shoes and thought about a man she did not know, and she was annoyed at herself for how much she was thinking about him. She wore the shoes to her next meeting. She wore them every day that week. On Friday evening, she was eating alone at a small restaurant near her residency building. One of those places that is not on any tourist list, that serves proper food, that feels like a neighborhood rather than a destination. When she looked up from her menu, and he was being seated 2 tables away. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. He did not wave. He did not smile. He gave a single small nod, the nod of a person acknowledging a mutual awareness, and opened his own menu. She looked at her menu. She looked at his table. She looked at her menu again. Then she stood up, picked up her water glass, walked to his table, and sat down across from him. He looked up from his menu. She held his gaze. "You had my shoes made." "Yes. Without asking me. You needed shoes." "That's not the point." "What's the point?" She looked at him. "The point is that you know things about me that I didn't tell you. And you do things for me that I didn't ask for. And I don't know if I should be grateful or afraid." He set down his menu. He looked at her with that same stillness she had noticed in the mall, that quality of complete attention that felt somehow both comfortable and dangerous. "What does your instinct tell you?" She considered that honestly. "My instinct says you're not going to hurt me." "Then trust it. My instinct has been wrong before." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment. "Tell me your name. Your real name. Not just Park. Park Seojun. What do you do, Park Seojun?" "Architecture. Buildings. Buildings and spaces. The design of environments." He picked up the menu again. "Have you eaten here before? The Galbi gym is worth ordering." She blinked. The shift was smooth and deliberate. "We were in the middle of a conversation. We can have more than one." He glanced up. "Are you hungry?" She sat back in her chair. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had appeared at the worst moment of her week and handled it without drama and sent her shoes, and was now calmly recommending beef stew at a restaurant they had both independently arrived at. "Yes," she said. "I'm hungry." "Good." They ate. They talked, really talked, for 2 hours about architecture and fashion and what it meant to build something that people would live inside. About Nairobi. About Seoul. About the difference between designing for beauty and designing for function, and whether the two things could ever be the same. He listened the way few people listen. Fully. Without preparing his next sentence while she was still speaking. She noticed that. At the end of the evening, he walked her to her building. It was cold. She had her coat. He did not offer his again. The gesture would have been too much, a repeat of something that had already meant something. But he walked close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. She stopped at the entrance. "You follow injured women to dinner often?" "Only the ones who fall dramatically." She stepped closer instead of stepping back. "Careful. You sound impressed." "I am. With my fall. With how you stood back up." She looked at him for a moment. He was taller than she had fully registered before. She had to angle her chin up slightly. In the cold night air, with the street lamps behind him, he looked like something deliberately composed. Like a building designed to be looked at. "You're dangerous," she said. Not as a warning. As an observation. His eyes were very still on hers. "You're not wrong." She smiled slowly, the first real smile she had given him. "I haven't even started." He laughed. It was soft, and it was real, and it changed his whole face. She walked inside. She did not look back this time. But she was still thinking about that laugh when she fell asleep. The weeks that followed were not a love story. Not yet. They were something more careful than that. A series of deliberate encounters that felt accidental. Conversations that went longer than either of them planned. Silences that became comfortable faster than she expected. He took her to see buildings. Not as a tour, as a conversation. He would stop in front of something and explain what the architect had been trying to do, what they had gotten right, what they had sacrificed. She started doing the same with fashion, pointing at what people wore on the street, explaining what a seam choice said about a designer's philosophy, what a color palette communicated before a word was spoken. They were teaching each other their languages. She did not ask again about how he knew things, about the men who appeared when they were needed, about the clients whose names he never mentioned, about the phone calls he excused himself to take, standing just far enough away that she could not hear, returning to the conversation as if he had never left it. She told herself she was being patient, that there was time. She told herself a lot of things. Darius came back. She had known he would. Park Seojun had told her he would. She had not prepared for how it would feel anyway. He found her outside her residency building one evening, waiting by the door, which meant he had been watching long enough to know her schedule. He had his hands in his pockets and the same look he had worn in the mall, the look of a man who had decided something. "You've been seeing someone," he said. "Get away from my building." A Korean man, older than me, expensive coat. He tilted his head. "Who is he?" "None of your business." "You are my business." "I am not. I was never yours. And you need to leave this city." He stepped closer. "Or what?" She held her ground. She had learned to do that, to plant her feet and meet his eyes and refuse to shrink. It did not make her unafraid. It just meant she had decided that fear would not make her decisions for her. "Or I will call the police." He laughed. "And tell them what?" "That your ex-boyfriend is standing outside on a public street." He reached out and touched her face, a slow, deliberate motion, the kind designed to demonstrate access, to say, "I can touch you, and there's nothing you can do about it." A car pulled up to the curb. The door opened. Park Seo-joon stepped out. He looked at Darius's hand on her face. He did not react visibly, no tension in his body, no change in his expression. He simply stood there on the pavement and looked at Darius with that complete, unhurried attention. Darius dropped his hand. Not because he wanted to, because something in the quality of that look communicated something that his body understood before his pride could object. "Get in the car, Makena," Park Seo-joon said quietly. She got in the car. Park Seo-joon stood on the pavement for a moment longer. He and Darius looked at each other. Nothing was said. Nothing visible happened. Then Park Seo-joon got in the car. The car drove away. Inside, she looked at him. Her hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline leaving her body the way it does when the danger has passed and the body finally admits it was afraid. He saw her hands. He did not reach for them. He simply placed his hand on the seat beside hers, open still, not touching her, offering warmth without taking anything. After a moment, she placed her hand over his. He turned his palm up. They drove in silence. 3 months into the residency, she was extended an invitation she had not expected. A full partnership opportunity with a Seoul-based design house. Real money. Real exposure. A reason to stay in the city for at least a year. She said yes. She told Park Seo-joon over dinner in his apartment. The first time she had been inside his space, which was clean and deliberately designed, full of structural beauty and very few personal objects. He listened to her describe the offer, and when she finished he was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy about it?" "Yes." "Then it's the right decision." She looked at him across the table. "I thought you might have something to say about it." "What would I say?" "That it means I'm staying longer. That this changes things." He looked at her steadily. "It doesn't change anything. It changes what I am to you." "What are you to me?" She had walked into that. She looked at her plate. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She looked up. He was looking at her the way he looked at buildings, with the full comprehension of a person who has already understood the structure and is now simply appreciating it. "You know exactly what you are to me," he said. "You're just deciding whether to say it out loud." She was quiet for a long moment. "This terrifies me," she said finally. "Not about the job." They both knew that. "I know. I don't know enough about you. You know what matters." "Do I?" He set down his fork. He looked at her carefully, and then he said something that she was not prepared for. "I'll tell you more. Whatever you want to know. Ask me." She stared at him. In 3 months, he had never offered that. He had answered what she asked, and not offered more. He had been present and careful and generous with his time and deliberately, completely private. "Why now?" "Because you're staying." He paused. "And because I want to." She asked him questions. He answered them. Some things were simple: his family, his education, the buildings he had designed, the cities he had worked in. Some things were more complicated. He spoke about those carefully, precisely, choosing words the way a person chooses which doors to open. He told her about the network he worked within, about clients who operated outside legal structures, about work that was sometimes architectural and sometimes something else. He did not dress it up. He did not minimize it. He told her the shape of it and let her decide what to do with the information. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Are you dangerous?" she asked. "In some contexts." "To me." He did not hesitate. "Never." She looked at his face. She had learned to read him by now, or at least to read more of him than most people did. And what she saw was not performance. It was not the face of a man managing her reaction. It was the face of a man who had said a true thing and was prepared to live with whatever came next. She picked up her fork. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay," she said again. "Tell me about the buildings." He told her about the buildings. They stayed at the table until midnight. He asked her to marry him 4 months later. It was not a grand gesture. He did not arrange anything elaborate. He did not get on one knee in a restaurant or coordinate a proposal with her friends. He simply asked her, in his apartment, on an ordinary evening, with the city lit up outside the window and her sketches spread across his dining table because she had been working and he had been reviewing project documents, and they had been sharing a space in that comfortable, completely natural way that had somehow become their normal. He slid the ring across the table to her. She looked at it. It was not the biggest ring she had ever seen. It was a single stone, a dark, rich sapphire in a clean architectural setting that looked like something he had designed himself, which she strongly suspected was true. "I'm not asking for your answer right now," he said, without looking up from his documents. "I'm asking you to consider it." She looked at him. "You're very calm for someone who just proposed." "I've thought about it carefully. I know what I want." He glanced up then. "Take the time you need." She looked at the ring for a long time. She thought about every conversation they had shared, about every time she had felt safe, really deeply safe, in a city that was not hers, about the shoes he had made for her, about the way he had covered her legs on the mall floor so the phones could not film her, about his palm turned up in the car. She picked up the ring. She put it on. "I'm not considering it," she said. "Yes." He looked at her for a moment, and there it was, that thing that happened rarely, that complete unguarding of his face, that opening of the door she was always aware existed. He reached across the table and took her hand. "Okay," he said. They married quietly. A small ceremony. His people, her people, a handful of others. Her mother came from Nairobi and studied Park Seo-joon for the entirety of the first day before approaching him privately. Makena never knew exactly what was said in that conversation, only that afterward her mother looked at her with an expression that said, "He will do." The first weeks of marriage were good. Better than good. They were learning each other in a new, more complete way, learning what it meant to share a life, to have someone inside the daily details of existence, to no longer be alone in the ordinary moments. But the life he had told her about, the network, the clients, the work that existed in the spaces between legitimate and dangerous, that life did not disappear because he had a wife. It announced itself 6 weeks after they married. She came home one evening to find 3 men in her apartment who she had never seen before. They were not threatening her. They were not even paying attention to her. They were sitting at the table with Park Seo-joon, and the conversation stopped completely when she walked in. Park Seo-joon looked up. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. She went to their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the murmur of voices she could not quite make out and tried to understand what she was feeling. 20 minutes later, the front door closed and he came into the room. She looked at him. "You married a criminal," she said. He did not flinch. He stepped close and looked at her with that complete attention. "You married one too. You lied. I told you the shape of it before you said yes. You didn't tell me it would come to my home." He was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I should have prepared you for that." She looked at him carefully. "What are you involved in?" "You know what I'm involved in. Tell me the full shape of it, not the careful version." He sat down beside her on the bed. He looked at his hands for a moment. And then he told her, not the careful version, not the edited version, but the real one. The full architecture of it. The network. The families he worked with. The money that moved through his projects. The power he held within a structure that had no name and no public face and operated through loyalty and consequence. She listened. When he finished, she sat with it for a long time. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. Quietly. Without pressure. She looked at him. "Do you want me to?" "No." No hesitation. She looked away. "Are you in danger?" "Sometimes." "Am I in danger?" "I would dismantle everything I have before I let that happen." She turned back to him. She studied his face. "You enjoy control." His eyes dropped briefly, not to her lips, but to her mouth, the corner of it, and returned to her eyes. "And you enjoy testing it." She stepped closer. "Are you threatened?" "By you." He smiled. It was slow and completely real. "Makena, I chose you. And if I choose to take over?" He leaned in, not touching, just close, his voice dropping. "Then I'll build the throne myself." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked at her hands and made a decision that was not small. "Tell me everything," she said. "Not because I'm afraid. Because if I'm in this life, I'm in it fully." He looked at her for a moment with that expression she had come to know, that rare, complete unguarding. "Okay," he said. The betrayal came from inside. His name was Cho Byung-ho. He had been with the network for 11 years, longer than anyone currently active, longer than most people survived in that world. He was trusted. He was regarded as something close to essential. Park Seo-joon had relied on him for years for exactly the kind of information and positioning that kept operations clean and protected. He had been selling information to a rival organization for 8 months. Park Seo-joon found out on a Thursday evening. He came home that night looking like a person who had just survived something, not physically, but internally. Like something structural inside him had been tested and had held, but was now showing the stress of what it had withstood. Makena saw it immediately. She did not ask. She made tea and sat across from him and waited. He told her. She listened. "What happens to him?" she asked. "That's being handled." "Handled how?" He looked at her. "Do you want to know that answer?" She thought about it. She thought about the line she had decided to stand on when she said, "Tell me everything." The line between being honest about the world she had entered and understanding every operational detail of it. "No," she said. "I trust you to handle it." He looked at her with something in his eyes that was not relief exactly, but was close to it. The look of a man who had not been certain how this would go. "Cho Byung-ho knew about you," he said. "He passed your name to the people he was working with." She was very still. "They know where you live," he said. "They know what you mean to me. Which makes me leverage." "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "What do we do?" He had already started planning it. She could see that. The careful, architectural mind that designed structures already at work on this problem. He walked her through it. A temporary change of location, increased security, a set of decisions he needed to make in the next 48 hours that would either resolve the problem or escalate it into something larger. "There's a risk," he said. "I need you to understand that." "I understand. If this goes badly." "It won't." He stopped. He looked at her. She looked back. "It won't," she said again. "Because I know how you work. And you don't make plans you haven't already won." A long silence. "You trust me that much?" he said. "I married you." She held his eyes. "That much." The 48 hours were the longest of her life. She stayed in a different location, a building she did not know, with 3 of his people posted outside and a 4th who stayed inside and did not speak to her, but was clearly there, clearly watchful, clearly steady. She worked on her designs. She ate the food that was brought. She did not contact anyone from her regular life, following his instruction to the letter. On the second evening, her phone rang. It was Darius. She stared at the screen for a moment. She answered. "I have something you want to know," Darius said. She was quiet. "The people your husband is dealing with, I've been talking to them. I gave them information. About you. About him." Her stomach went cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they want me to deliver you somewhere. And I'm not going to do it." She sat with that for a moment. "Why not?" He was quiet. Then, "Because I'm an idiot and he stopped. "Because it went too far. I followed you here because I was angry and I've done things I shouldn't have, and this crossed a line I'm not crossing." "Darius." She kept her voice very flat. "Did you go to these people yourself? Did you seek them out?" A pause. "They came to me," he said. "After the mall. Someone approached me. Said they were watching your husband and that I could be useful. I thought," he stopped again. "I thought it was just information. That it would just create problems for him. I didn't know they would use it the way they're using it." She was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you?" He gave her an address. She called Park Seo-joon. He answered on the first ring. She told him. Everything. The call. What Darius had said. The address. There was a silence. "You believe him?" Park Seo-joon said. "I don't know. But I'm not willing to ignore it." Another silence. "Okay," he said. "We'll handle it. I'm coming." "Makena." "I'm coming," she said again. "He'll talk to me in a way he won't talk to your people. And you need information." A long pause. "Okay," he said. They met Darius together, Makena and Park Seo-joon and 2 of his people, in a quiet building across the city. Darius looked terrible. He looked like a man who had not slept and had recently understood the full scope of something he had gotten himself into. He gave them everything. Names. Contacts. A meeting that was scheduled for the following day that the rival organization believed Makena would be delivered to. He looked at Park Seo-joon at the end of it. I didn't know it would get here. I want you to understand that. Park Seo-joon looked at him without warmth. I understand what you knew and what you chose not to think about. Darius nodded. He looked at Makena. I'm sorry. She looked at the man she had once trusted, the man who had shouted at her in a mall and stood over her on the floor and followed her to another country. And she saw, underneath all of it, someone who had made terrible decisions and had arrived, finally, at the point where he could not make another one. I know, she said. Go home, Darius. Go back to Nairobi. Don't come back. He left. The rival organization was handled. The planned meeting became a trap. The people who had used Darius's information and Cho Byung-ho's betrayal found themselves in a situation that was organized by someone who designed environments for a living and who was, in that discipline, exceptionally thorough. No one was killed. That was something she asked for and something he honored. Afterward, she asked him about that. You could have gone further, she said. Yes, but you didn't. You asked me not to. She looked at him. Is that the only reason? He thought about it. No, he said. It's the reason I followed. She stood up and went to him and put her arms around him. Not dramatically, just simply, because he was her person and the weeks had been hard and they were still here, both of them, still standing. He held her. They stood there for a long time in the quiet. The year continued. The design partnership became a success. Genuinely, not in the way that things become successful through compromise, but in the way that happens when someone with real vision is given real resources. Her work started appearing in publications. Her name started traveling the way names do when they are attached to work that people remember. Park Seo-joon watched all of it with quiet, complete pride. He never claimed any part of it. He never suggested his connections had helped her, because they had not. Her work had done that. He simply watched her build something that was entirely her own. One evening, about a year after the marriage, she found him standing in the living room looking at a sketch she had left on the side table, an early version of a collection she was developing. He was looking at it with the same attention he gave to buildings. What do you see? She asked. The same thing I saw 2 years ago at that showcase. He looked up. Someone who builds things differently. She walked to him. I've been thinking, she said. About what comes next. He waited. I want to open my own house here. Not a partnership. Mine. He was quiet for a moment. What do you need? Capital. Space. Time. I can help with the first two. I know. She looked at him carefully. I'm asking you to. He understood what she was saying, that this was different from before, that she was choosing to let him in fully to something that mattered to her enormously, that this was trust given deliberately. Yes, he said. She smiled, that slow smile that had taken her a long time to give him the first time and now came easily. Good, she said. Now tell me about the space. I already have 3 options. She laughed. She put her face in her hands and laughed, because of course he did. 2 years after the mall. The house opened. Makena's label, her name, clean and direct and entirely hers, launched in Seoul to an audience that was not enormous but was precisely right. The people who mattered were there. The coverage was real. Her mother flew in again, and this time did not study Park Seo-joon, but stood beside him at the back of the room and watched Makena walk out to meet her audience. She looked at him then. He looked back. And she thought, this is how it is supposed to feel. Not perfect. Nothing about the last 2 years had been perfect. There had been fear and danger and hard conversations and moments when she had doubted whether she was in the right place or the right life. There had been Darius and Cho Byung-ho and 3 men in her apartment and 48 hours in an unfamiliar building. There had been all of that. And there had been this. A man who had covered her legs on a mall floor, who had picked up her designs without being asked, who had asked her quietly if she could stand, who had built her a pair of shoes and then told her the full truth about who he was and let her decide. She walked back toward him when the room began to celebrate around her. She took his hand. Happy, he said. Yes. He squeezed her hand once. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. And in the city of Seoul, in a room full of her work on the walls, with her mother laughing nearby, and his people standing at the edges of the room the way they always did, present, quiet, steady, Makena stood beside the man she had chosen and felt something she had not always been certain she would find. Not perfect. Not easy. Not without risk. But real. Real. and built on something solid. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Before you go, I need your thoughts in the comments. Was Makena right to stay? Or did she give up too much to be in that life? Was Park Seo-joon honest with her early enough? Or did he wait too long? What about Darius? Did he redeem himself at the end? Or does one moment of conscience not cancel everything else he did? And which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the mall? The shoes? The proposal? Or that night when she said, "Tell me everything. Not because I'm afraid, but because I'm in this fully"? Tell me in the comments. Drop a like if this story kept you hooked. Share it with someone who needs a good story today. And if you are new here and this is the first story you have watched on this channel, subscribe. Because this is what we do here every single time. I'll see you in the next one.